Hopefully this is as exciting for you as it is for me, because finally being able to see this brought to life actually on the tabletop, and all of that effort, the time and hours of time put into painting, constructing, research is paying off. You're seeing my vision, my ideas made real. I'm going to go piece by piece and kind of give you an idea of why I built it, what the impetus for it was. If you've been reading my articles, I'm sure you've seen and read a lot of what brought a lot of this to life, what was the motivation. And I just kind of want to take a moment and kind of show the functionality that I can't capture with photographs and narrative contextually. I wanted to start off with one of my favorite pieces of terrain that I created so far, and it's a recreation of one of the scenes from the 1982 movie, The Thing, where there's a dog kennel and this creature pretty much escapes out of it. And I wanted to capture a lot of the elements where you have the food bowls, the chains, and then I added a little bit of blending narrative, if you will, because I wanted to incorporate one of my warheads that's been broken open and is leaking out radiation, chemicals, or whatever. And maybe that created something here. Or it could just, be from the movie, because I did recreate one of the creatures and I'm extremely pleased with it. And I did a little something here where the base actually blends with the terrain. If you were to line it up, those blood droplets actually continue onto the base. So it literally has a flow, so it looks like it's actually coming out. Just having fun with it, creating some of the elements that I really appreciate from the movie that were inspiring. And I never really had the need or desire to really buy a Chaos Spawn kit, because I just didn't really appeal to me. But when I got this idea, it just clicked. I had to get one. I'm really pleased with how it turned out. It's just a piece of scatter terrain, something to look nice or whatnot. Maybe add some narrative elements or something to it at some point. But I'm really pleased with how it came out. And I really recommend, finding the things that are inspiring you and creating a little like pseudo diorama, if you will, to incorporate in your battles, just to add some visual flair. The next piece I created was a large meteorite, crashing into the ground with an impact crater. And the nice thing about this is it's really easy to make. It looks absolutely visually stunning. It does block line of sight. It's a nice piece of terrain to have. It's got some height, it's got some width. But the cool thing about it is this is completely modular. And what I mean by that is, obviously this is not attached, so it can come off. So you can use this as a standalone piece, and you can use a crater as a standalone piece. And as you can see, I used some of the ice sheet from a lighting lens I got from a Home Depot. And it really gives you that illusion that it's been melted. It's crystallized. The impact had so much heat and thermal that it's just absolutely turned everything into almost a glass crystalline structure. Even the rocks have a metallic look to them. I made sure to angle them away from the blast so it looks like everything was blown outward. But the cool part about this is, obviously you get a squad of 10 models in there, no problem, and it will function as a crater. But when I said everything was modular, is all of these pieces, barring the inner diameter ring, can come off and also be scatter terrain pieces. And they could go with the meteorite itself and be like chunks that were blown off, or you can use it with the crater, or you can use a combination of both. And it's just these little touches that really make a difference when you want to set up your battlefields and do something new and unique with it, or tell a story, or have a narrative. And it's so simple. You look for ways to incorporate, the ability to have a little bit of modularness to your terrain so that you can move them around. They have a form and a function that allows you to enhance your battlefields, because that's really what it's all about, is making sure you have the ability to create something that's visually appealing, but also has tactical and, you know, strategic ramifications. So once again, you can find the tutorials for almost all this terrain on my website. You know, check it out. I've been doing a ton of artistic content articles. I think I'm up to 42, 43 now. And it's just simple things like this that can really enhance a battlefield. Next thing I want to point out is these little lights. Now, it's such a simple little thing, but you can do so much with it. So here I've marked off kind of like a cordoned off area where they're doing some excavation, and you know, you could basically specify that that's a terrain piece, that within that area you get cover. It doesn't have to just be something that's pretty and, you know, and there for a visual aspect. You can assign narrative to it. And the funny thing is, those are just the little lights that I got out of having 2 sets of Kill Team starter sets. And I never used them. I didn't really want them on my buildings. And all it takes is a little bit of paint. And now, you know, I can make HLZs with these. I can move these however I want, space them out, do whatever shapes. Some of the ideas I have is making paths from building to building so that, you know, it's kind of like a guide for whenever there's blizzard conditions or nighttime conditions. So it would literally show basically paths to all of the different facilities and terrain. Like I said, you know, landing zones, taxiway lights. There's just so much you can do with such a simple little thing. So when you're going through your bits and everything like that, you know, really take a good look. You know, what can you do? What can these little pieces, you know, perform as far as a function or a role on your battlefields? Because little things like that really make all the difference. Because if I just had the galvanic servo hauler and everything here on the map, it would look cool. But with it corded on with the lights, it encloses it and it makes it whole. And it sells it that something's going on there, you know, stay out, it's dangerous or whatever. So it's those little touches that can really make all the difference. I would obviously be remiss if I didn't address my servo hauler. I did paint it in an Arctic theme. I'm very pleased with the way it came out. It looks absolutely amazing on this map. And if you've been following the build, I have made modifications. So first and foremost, you can see the support legs that are on either side. This one's a little longer. Obviously, Games Workshop did not intend for this to be functional. I have gone ahead and changed that. So I have a piece of chain, and let's see if I can zoom in here. It's basically magnetized around 2 disc magnets that are clamped between those 2 pieces. So I have the ability to do pretty much whatever I want with this. With the piece of chain, I've used a bunch of paper clips and cut them and bend them into all kinds of hooks and such. And this allows me to basically use it like you would use it in real life. So I've used, you know, some of those paper clips here on this block of ice to give something for this to clamp onto. It actually is functional. It will actually pick it up. And once again, it's very easy to move this piece of chain. I'll be doing a demonstration of that in another video, just a little quick video showing, you know, just all the things you can actually do with it. Because I really want to do a video that focuses just on the galvanic servo hauler. Because, you know, it's a $30 piece of terrain. I can't recommend it enough. It looks fantastic. There's a lot to paint if you want to put some details on it. I really enjoyed painting it. It was nice. And it has great terrain rules. It's going to be functional on your battlefields. And it's almost a blend of scatter terrain and an actual piece of terrain, which is very unusual. I really like that because it's versatile. But not only that, you get to see all the different ways that I use it. Because once again, it's very easy to get some chain and make the modifications that I did. And then you have the ability to tell stories, do narratives, and set up these really thematic battlefields that'll you're going to get your money's worth. Let's put it that way. So moving on, I'm sure you guys have seen what I did with the lava in previous battle reports and artistic contents. So here's my take on an ice lake. So you've seen the crystals that I use, and it's just fill that you get for like making vases and stuff like that. Super cheap. I got as much as, I'm gonna say, half a pound for $6. It's a tremendous amount. I did spray paint these white and blue to give it a little bit of color variation and help it blend in with the mat. One thing I have noticed, and it's a good thing I did that, is this mat does have a slightly blue hue. So there's a lot of blues in here that I wasn't expecting. There are some very stark white areas throughout the mat, but there's also a lot of blue. And I think that's a lot to do with the background and the way they blend the snow, which I like. Unfortunately, it makes some of my bases that are extremely stark white kind of stand out a little too much. So I'm gonna have to take some watered down blue glaze and blend those a little bit better so they'll blend into the mat and not stand out so much. Getting back to the lake, it's very easy to make. Once again, it's just your standard piece of cloth, and then once again taking these sheets, and they have a crystalline side and a smooth side. So you can they're actually pretty versatile in how you want to use them. And then you shatter them up, and then you can just lay them down. And there you go. You have a shattered ice sheet on a lake. Too simple. It's nice because depending on how you look at them, they can be very dark and completely transparent, or they can really catch the light. So I like that they're kind of dynamic visually, that, you know, it's just not a flat piece with a static color. Breaking up all these pieces, too easy. You get a 2 foot by 4 foot section for $12. Break it up and you can make a lot of terrain out of that. And once again, I did spray paint the bottom of this black and then left that crystalline structure face up. And there's so many effects and different narratives that you can do with the terrain by using it that way. Moving on, staying with my nuclear theme, I do have some plutonium rods encased inside my block of ice. I'm sure you've seen it on my artistic content. It actually does fit in there. Looks absolutely amazing. And it's just one of those little, elements that you can sell a narrative on. I needed uranium rods for the, nuclear power plant, weapons grade plutonium manufacturing. So it's just one of those pieces that had to be made. I'm pretty excited about it. Along those veins, I have plutonium cores here. And once again, they're just BBs out of a BB gun. So I had a bunch of them because a daughter has one. And it's just too easy to take some of those, put them on some bases, and they do stack. So what's neat about this is I can either use them as objective markers, or I can have them as, something that's ready for shipment. There's so much things you can do with the narrative there. So once again, it's just those simple little pieces of terrain that help you, create that vibe or that atmosphere that you're looking for. And once again, I'm going for the nuclear weapons, production, manufacturing, transport, and then military, garrison, and actual usage. Moving on, I got a little Geiger counter with a little plutonium core on there, with a little MIRV or multiple independent reentry vehicle, or warhead if you want to keep it simple. And then I have a whole rack of warheads that would normally be loaded in the missile, and they can actually be loaded. The little tool set from the galvanic servo hauler, just a nice little touch. And then when I was doing my research and looking at different Arctic facilities and everything like that, they have the weather balloons, the radiation monitoring equipment on these things. And I was like, well, that's just something I have to make. And, it's too easy. Thin piece of wire. What's cool is you can actually just tap it and, put it in motion. And hey, look, it's a windy day, right? So put the Imperial Eagle on there, threw a couple decals on there, gave it a little bit of the Mechanicus flair because obviously we got a little Mechanicus theme going on here, you know, with the galvanic servo hauler and all that. And it's just one of those little pieces of terrain. You know, it took me about 30 minutes to knock out. I'll be putting that artistic content article up soon. It was really easy to make. Just one of those little pieces that, you know, it just adds to the atmosphere. It's a scatter piece of terrain. Probably won't perform much of a function. Maybe an objective marker or something like that. Maybe. But it's just those little touches that really help sell the whole atmosphere that I'm trying to create. And then this has been a definite favorite is, you know, basically using inkjet printers to create really detailed, readable terrain at a micro scale. Obviously, there's a galaxy map and a command console, and here's the Inquisitor about ready to give the command to launch Exterminatus via a missile on some unsuspecting planet, I'm sure. And then I did the cabling and ran it into a little scratch-built transmitter. And once again, it's just by 3D printing, you can get so much detail that it would be almost impossible to accomplish at this scale. And it's really easy to do. You know, it doesn't have to be paint everything and only paint. I really prefer using multimedia in my battlefields and trying new things. And it's just one of those little touches that you're probably not going to notice it when you're playing your games because the details are just so fine. But if you ever do look in, or I like to take a lot of perspective photos, you'll see that, and it really pops out and comes out. Something that really has impressed me are these signs. And once again, you know, $16 for an LED name tag, and you think, well, what are you going to do with an LED name tag? Well, you can literally program them to display anything you want, pretty much how you want it. And it really sells that narrative because you can literally say what you're intending to happen. You know, is it a reactor leak? You know, is it an impending launch? You know, is there an intruder? You know, radiation leak, for example. I've even had ideas where I display just the temperature, you know, and it's like extremely cold. It just sells that narrative. It kind of immerses you a little bit. It gives you a little, you know, eye candy. Gives you something to look at when you're playing your battles. Moving on, this is definitely one of my centerpieces. Is my Exterminatus missile, and I'm extremely pleased with this. I got the terrain kit, this gantry, for like $10. It's really simple, but it absolutely was perfect for my needs. And when you look at this, you know, it's massive. It's a pretty good size. So it gives you something to look at. It'll be functional, obviously, with a couple levels of terrain, line of sight blocking and whatnot. But the best part about this is I built it to be completely modular. So what I mean by that is I can use this either as an entire missile, or I can actually deconstruct it and break it down, and I can have a totally different narrative. So let's say I use it like this. Maybe it's in the process of being fueled or loaded. And one of the neat things is being able to actually load missiles. So, you know, now, you know, I have where maybe they're doing an inspection on the warheads, or they're, you know, like I said, preparing them for launch. But the beautiful thing is I can use it how I want. So I can reflect different stages of launch preparation, construction, and how I want to tell a story or narrative is completely up to me. I can use these individual components as, you know, objective markers. They look amazing, and when you use them in conjunction with the servo hauler, where maybe it's, you know, moving them over to the launch site, they can function as scatter terrain, line of sight blocking. And then obviously the gantry kind of does a double duty here, because it's modular in the fact that I don't have to use it with the missile. I can, have just the platform stand alone. And once again, everything breaks down into its core components. And, once again, a little bit of inkjet printing. We put some really fine details on there to give you something to look at. And, I've even thought about doing some more of that on the insides of these, but I really like the gold and the sterile NASA look that you get with the gold foil. But the nice thing is you can use it however you want. And I always encourage, when you build your terrain, make sure you're thinking about, I'm not just building a static piece of terrain to sit there. You want to be able to do things with it, have it be modular. Can it be broken down? What can you add or subtract to it to get different effects out of it? And I wanted to give a small example of that because when I was building, this gantry and everything like that, I had played a game in Texas back when I was in the military, and the store had built this really elaborate hive city, and they had the galvanic servo hauler up on some elevated platforms. And I always liked that because I was like, well, that just makes sense, because when you normally see cranes, they're on, they're really high up on buildings, either doing construction or just because they want that extra height. So one of the neat things about this, and we'll just have to take this off of here. And let me disconnect all of this. So this actually will fit on top of that. So now I have this huge crane, and that's why I had all this extra chain, because now I can do all kinds of narrative by having, that maybe at the center of the battlefield as a piece of terrain. I can have it interacting with whatever, picking up a missile. And I've even had where I can have almost the top assembly underneath the claw where it's actually constructing the missile. So there's so much that can be done with that. Another modular piece of terrain that I scratch built was the silo bunker cover. Because maybe this is a hydraulic lift and it lifts up into position, but when it's not in use, it retracts and everything goes underground. Well, obviously you want to protect that, right? That's what we do in the military. So I built this bunker and built a rail system, and yes, it actually does function. So it can actually move over that and protect it. And obviously it's been attacked a couple times. And it's just those little touches that makes everything so dynamic, because I can either use it in a retract position, or I can have it where it opens up and, the missile's exposed and whatnot. But there's so much you can do with just simple things, because once again, this is just foam terrain. And when I say foam terrain, I literally took foam in a can, sprayed it into a mold, shaped it, cut it up, threw some 100-pound test picture frame wire in there to simulate some rebar, and threw a couple coats of spray paint on it. And I'm not even done putting snow effects and everything like that on it. It's simple. It doesn't have to be expensive. It's always going to cost you a little bit of time, but it's not something that has to be hard, and you can add so much to your battlefields with just simple things. Really, really like this. This is the second creature from the movie The Thing that goes with the other Chaos Spawn. Tried some blood splatter effects, and really, really, really pleased. Had to use a lot of the behind the scenes imagery and photos to actually figure out what this thing looked like, because in the movie it's almost impossible to tell. You get snippets of it, but it's really dark, so you only get, the talons and the face and stuff like that. Once again, it's one of those cool, neat, and thematic things that when I'm playing my Chaos Army, you know, there's a little bit of a throwback and homage to those movies. Not enough to rip you out of the immersion, but it's just something that has a little bit of cool and wow factor to it. I wanted to give another example of the cracked ice sheeting. And once again, this looks amazing. Instead of having an actual fractured sheet, I wanted to have a lake that's actually completely covered. Super simple. You know, you can easily shape this with a pair of needle nose pliers when you're breaking it. Once again, do wear gloves and eye protection. You know, it can be sharp until you sand the edges, and when it shatters, it can ricochet sharp pieces, and you don't want that in your ocular lobe. So the beautiful thing about this is you can either use it on the ice side, where it's crystalline, or on the smooth side, and you get different effects by doing so. And once again, you just cut out a piece of fabric after you have your shape. I just traced it. You throw it down and just lay this on top of it. And I would cut my lake to be a little smaller just to make it easier to position this, and so you don't have any overlap, because then you'll see the fabric. And it looks amazing, the way it catches the light and everything like that. And it's so simple. It adds a little bit of character to your battlefields. Maybe you want to cover up something on your battlefield that, you know, maybe looks out of place, or, you know, you have a piece of terrain, let's say, that's covering something and it shouldn't. Maybe it looks out of place. You could literally take this and, you know, move it right over, and now that background game mat pattern is gone. There's so many uses, and it's nice because you get such a different effect by using the crystalline side. And then just flip everything over. And now you have the smooth side. And like I said, you really have to see it to really capture the difference it makes. But you have like a sheen versus, you know, the crystalline. And it also changes dramatically how it looks when the light catches it. So really recommend that stuff. It's just fun to play around with, and there's so much potential that you can unlock with just simple materials like that. This is my second bunker. Once again, just having some fun with the military theme and you know, weapons damage, rebar. Really like you know, damaged and the grim dark atmosphere you get with battle damage. So I created the plutonium jackets to go around the plutonium core. So when a nuclear weapon is used, the first thing that has to happen is you have to implode the plutonium to cause the cascading nuclear fission reaction. And in order to do that, what they do is they basically surround these tiny little plutonium cores in plastic explosive in a soccer ball pattern, because then that explosive force causes that chain reaction by all the energy and force that's directed towards the core. So I wanted to represent at least that aspect of it a little bit, so I created a little terrain piece that has that. And then I also created objective markers 1 through 6 using the MIRVs or warheads, because I thought it was just a neat touch. You know, they can just be sitting around a scatter terrain, or I can actually use them as objective markers. I got quite a few things I can use as objective markers now, which is nice, because it just changes things up, and, you know, you get sick and tired of just using dice sometimes. So that's pretty much all the terrain that I have, and at least the progress and state. I do want to put some snow effects on the bunker, as well as this, and put some snow at least on the top part of the rails to blend that in a little bit better. I am going to go back, and like I said, I think these are just a little bit too white, so they need a little bit of a blue tint to them. Some wash will take care of that if it's done lightly enough. But there's so much potential here, because you can use all these little design elements in so many different ways. And once again, this is only a small portion of the terrain that's going to be used on this battlefield. So, you know, not all of it's going to be used. You know, pieces can be used to do the theme. I can, you know, do a recreation of the thing on a battlefield. I can go full military using, you know, bunkers and whatnot. I still have to print out all the placards and signs that are I'm going to be putting on fencing. And you're going to see, like I said, there's so much more terrain I have yet to build that have come from sponsors. And I'm doing some really unique and creative things. You're going to get to see videos of that here shortly. But I also wanted to take a moment and really highlight this this sheeting once again, because like I said, I don't think you can fully understand how much terrain you can make out of a 2 foot by 4 foot sheet for 12 bucks. So I wanted to show you just how much I was able to make. So this is a gallon Ziploc, and there is a ton. I picked up a 6 foot by 4 foot piece of this cloth to use for rivers and lakes. So I can literally change this battlefield into almost an entirely water-based battlefield if I really choose to. I am going to make a couple rivers and stuff like that. And I have even bigger pieces that aren't broken up that I'm going to be using for that. And then, you know, once again, just so much of this ice crystal material. So I'll be able to blend the terrain in and put it around the edges and whatnot and do just like I do with the aquarium rocks. And then I really wanted to show just like the level of depth that I'm going into for creation of this battlefield. So I wanted to leave you with a surprise. So something I've been working on, and I'm still waiting on the trusses to come. I was able to find some plastic scale trusses, basically metal framework that I need, because what I'm going to build is a functional, let that soak in for a minute, solar farm. And, you know, when you're in the Arctic, you absolutely rely on solar power, and you'll see lots of solar panels and such. And I wanted to recreate that. What better way to recreate it than by actually using scale solar panels? So I found these and immediately knew I had to use them. These things sit at about 4 inches by 3 inches. So they will make excellent line of sight blocking terrain. To give you an idea of scale, let me come over here to the Inquisitor. And I mean, it'll easily block out some models and whatnot. And I'll have it maybe slightly elevated a little bit off the ground, maybe base height or whatnot. And these are legit, no kidding, 5-volt solar panels. So you would absolutely be able to charge your cell phone on a bright day. I have 10 of these, and I am not joking when I say that these are legitimate solar panels. And I'm super excited about this because I think it's just going to look so amazing when you have no kidding solar panels. And like I said, each one is going to be modular. It will move, it will rotate. Each one will be based independently. And it's just, there's so much that you can do with something like that. So I hope you're excited to see the final outcome and some of the battle reports that I'm able to produce now that I have an Arctic battlefield and a lot of Arctic themed, nuclear weapon themed and military themed terrain, scatter terrain, and just, you know, visual cues. I'm extremely excited to be able to present this and show it for the first time in pretty much its entirety. I'm very, very pleased with how it looks on the game mat. You never really know until you really have it, you know, on hand and you set it up, and you get a kind of a sense of the scope and scale and how things are going to play out and how they're going to interact with the colors of the game mat. Like I said, sometimes you do find little nuances like the bases being a hair too white, but it's like I said, it's easy to adapt and overcome and